Welcome to Make Growth Happen, the podcast designed to empower small and medium business owners with actionable insights and proven strategies to drive sales and elevate marketing effectiveness. I'm your host, Garth Fasano, president and co-founder of Reimagining, and this podcast is your go-to resource for navigating the complexities of modern sales and marketing. Each episode features inspiring conversations with successful SMB owners who have scaled their business, vendors offering cutting-edge solutions, and sales leaders with a proven track record. Together, we'll uncover innovative tactics, share real-world stories, and explore key strategies that lead to sustainable growth. Whether you're looking for practical tips, strategic advice, or just the inspiration to take your business to the next level, Make Growth Happen is here to guide you and support your journey to thrive in today's competitive market. Today, we're joined by Rob Carpenter, an entrepreneur who has embraced the world of entrepreneurship through acquisition. After a successful career in venture-backed tech, Rob has transitioned into owning multiple Merry Maids franchises. Through a blend of acquisitions and a targeted approach to transform the traditional sales and marketing playbook, Rob has been driving growth within his business and freedom in his life. If you're looking to learn how to think outside of the box, challenge some of the conventions, and bring a fresh approach to sales and marketing within a franchise system, stay tuned. You won't want to miss this episode. Rob, welcome. Tell us a bit about your background and how you got into being a franchise owner at Merry Maids.
Oh, man. Good to be here. Thanks for having me. I think, in the beginning, probably like a lot of entrepreneurs, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it just totally opened my eyes to the idea of entrepreneurship, to owning businesses, to owning assets. It was a very transformative moment in my life, learning that, hey, you don't just have to work a 9 to 5. Having listened to thousands of these types of podcasts, it's not an uncommon story, but it's probably, the way it is for a reason. So that kind of got me on my trajectory of entrepreneurship. I started a lawn mowing business in high school, like a lot of people, started an advertising business in college, got into commercial real estate, and then in 2012 launched a custom software development company. So built that up from an idea to about 30 people in 3 different countries. So we had offices here in Denver. I acquired a company in London. I acquired a company in India. Ultimately ended up selling that business to another entrepreneur. And then I started a artificial intelligence business way before it was cool, and a painful life lesson that sometimes being too early is just as bad as being too late. And I think that's probably going to be my takeaway. Started it in 2017, ran that business for about 7 years, raised 18 million in venture and private equity backed capital, exited that business last fall, and then took a few months off to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And well, let me go back because we are now in 2025. So I guess I should say in 2023 in the fall, I left. And then in January of 24, I decided to do the ETA route. And so within 6 weeks, I had made 4 offers and I got the fourth one accepted. And I rode the seller, I rode the broker, I rode the bank, and we closed the transaction in 6 weeks on the dot. So from January 1st kickoff that I was going to do ETA to formally taking over the business April 1st. It was a 90-day process. So can be done if you want it. And I was just looking for kind of a boring, basic, stable, blue-collar business, something that people are always going to need, something that generates revenue, something that doesn't require, brain damage to be able to run it, where I can put a good operating team in place to manage the business for me. And it's kind of living up to that, where, probably work 15 to 20 hours a week, and then the rest of the time I get to spend with my wife and my 2 girls.
And so is that working? Is it running without too much brain damage, as you put it, or is that goal achieved?
I would say I'm like 60% of the way there.
Okay.
So we talked about this a bit in the pre-call, but my massive mistake, and sometimes you just got to touch the burner to double check that it's hot, was changing too much too fast. I think it's important to respect what the prior owner has built, the infrastructure that they put in place. They do things a certain way. That doesn't mean there's not things that can't be changed, or that longer term there's not major structural things that have to be changed. I do think now, with a little bit of hindsight, there's a tremendous amount of wisdom in the idea of, don't poke the bear, just kind of let it do its thing for a little while and really understand how it works. And so within the first like 2 months, I ramped up and made a bunch of changes, including hiring Rainmaker. And then over the next 2 to 3 months, I ended up winding down most of those initiatives minus Rainmaker, kind of going back to where the business was at when I bought it, with a lot less working capital than I started with. So it was a bit of a painful lesson, but sometimes you just got to learn those things. And now moving forward, I'll know to be a lot more cautious with future acquisitions. And the office I'm in right now is the second business I bought, and so far I'm living up to that, and I'm not messing with it, and I'm just kind of letting it do its thing.
I think that that's one of the classic mantras in ETA is that you get in, you watch, you observe, and then you slowly make changes. What you said you really targeted sales and marketing early on. What brought you to really focus on that? Why was that the focus area in the business relative to some more like the operations of the business?
I mean, marketing and sales I definitely focus on, but a lot of the stuff that I also changed was operations. And I think there was a
Okay.
lot there in terms of this being a very analog business. Both the South Denver and then the Boulder locations that I purchased for Merry Maids had been around for over 40 years. And there was still a massive amount of stuff that was being done on paper. Things were being filed. They weren't digital, they weren't nimble. And so some of those changes did need to be made. And for the most part, there's been no real negative repercussions going in terms of a transition from a more analog operations to a digital operation. So I don't really regret that too much. And I've made some of those changes in the second acquisition as well. Um, I think that it's a combination of trying to change too much from a sales and marketing standpoint without really fundamentally understanding the P&L of the business, as well as in 2024, it's just been kind of a tough market. Most people I know who are running businesses, especially if they're discretionary, which residential house cleaning is, felt a bit of a contraction last year. I think inflation's hitting people in the pocketbooks, and I also think that the election created a lot of concerns for people. And so I was spending, I think, too much money on sales and marketing without really understanding exactly how leads flow through the business and where things go. And so that was one of the things I had to kind of pull back on and dial in a little bit more moving forward.
Let's dig into that because I think a lot of folks in the ETA community look at the businesses, the target businesses, like a Merry Maids franchise. I think that's a fantastic example. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to modernize a lot of the things that you've talked about on the operation side. And hey, man, there's a lot of opportunity, marketing and sales. I can just do those a little bit better and improve the business. So, what did you change at the beginning, and what are you doing differently now in your second acquisition?
Yeah, so I think from a sales and marketing standpoint, I always looked at these sort of home residential services, the most professional and seemingly best run ones, had call center operations where, if I need something done on my house, maybe I need to get my house painted, and my wife is like, well, call 5 or 6 people, get the best price for us, and you call some guy and he's like hanging off a ladder and he's in the middle of painting, right? It's like, oh, that's probably not that big of an operation. Several of them won't even answer your phone call. And then you call somebody else and they immediately pick up the phone and it's like, how can I help you? It's like, oh, this is a very professional run company. And by and large, prior to me starting, everything in Merry Maids was done by the individuals working in the office. Some could be great at sales. The best run offices have a 35% closing rate. Some are really bad and they're sub 10% in terms of the leads that they close. And for me, with the goal of buying 3, 5, 10, residential home consumer businesses, I want to really sort of systematize the back end operations and have a very consistent sort of public facing customer service experience. So I made that jump. Obviously, with Rainmaker, that was a positive experience. Where I got a little ahead of my skis, forgive the Colorado colloquialism here, I brought in a fractional chief marketing officer because the market for home residential services is massive. Merry Maids itself has something like 1 to 3% of the market, and it's either the biggest or the second biggest brand in the country for residential home cleaning. And so there's just huge, like in my opinion, like oil gusher levels of untapped revenue potential. And so I brought in somebody to help with that. But it's like, not only are you covering their salary, now you're covering the cost of everything else they want to do. pay-per-click campaigns, LSA campaigns, email campaigns, store knockers, right? And if you've set aside the capital in your startup budget to do that, then you're probably fine. I really did it. I had a chunk of working capital, about $40,000 for a business doing about $1 million a year in revenue. And that just wasn't enough. And so I got beyond my skis a little bit of way over investing in all of these different services, and then burning through that working capital and really starting to blow up the P&L. These businesses have a decent margin, but when you tack on things that weren't there for the prior owner, like debt, for example, maybe health insurance, especially for me, a lot of the owners I'm buying from are over 70, right? And so they haven't had to worry about health insurance in like 7 years. But I need health insurance. I've got a young family. I got to cover them for that. So there's a lot of expenses I had to layer in just without changing a thing, just to show up each day and be able to run the business. And then I layered on all those different initiatives, and that really impacted the cash flow of the business. And, then I had to eat my medicine, which was I had to let the fractional chief marketing officer go, even though she was awesome. I had to kind of scale back and pause various campaigns, and I had to take a lot of stuff over myself as well.
And so is that because like, just didn't have the working capital in the business? Are those still the right ideas for a franchise like Merry Maids? I mean, or is that just like, hey, the timing didn't work out and those are things you want to phase back in?
They're definitely things that I want to phase back in. I just want to be more thoughtful instead of trying to boil the
Got it.
ocean, probably looking at doing them one at a time and getting better at sort of sitting on my hands. My wife referred to it as like bear hugging the business. She's like, stop loving it to death. Like, just let it do its thing. There's a reason that it was valuable enough and that you wanted to buy it in the first place. So
As a
I think,
searcher, it's hard not to
yeah.
bear hug your business as well.
Well, then
Yes,
you've
I
you've
understand
got
that.
pent up energy. My timeline to buy was shorter than anybody else that I've met, but I think that my energy level was probably going to be the same whether you've been searching for a year or two. At some
Mhm.
point, you're like, all right, I bought my business, and now I'm excited to play with my toy, and I want to start like changing things in it, right? And I think it's hard, or it can be hard. It was hard for me. To just sort of sit and chill and let the business kind of do its thing.
So, what were some of the initiatives that you were working on marketing, and what were the results of those? And obviously, they weren't a standout success, otherwise they would have funded that. But in marketing, I think is a learning process. You got to implement a new strategy, test a campaign, optimize it, track the data, and use those learnings to launch the next campaign. So tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that process and what you did there.
I think one of the funner ones that I had, and I'm surprised they didn't put this into the business brokerage summary, but because this business has been around for 40 years, I mean, they have customers going back 20 years, and they've got a ton of digital leads from the last 5 to 10 years, and they had no sort of an internet marketing follow-up strategy. There's no retargeting that's going on. There was no email, remarketing to leads that were lost, text message marketing to leads that were lost. And so that's one of the initiatives that I'm working through right now. And I've got a list currently of about 5,500 contacts, and I just found another list with probably another 5,000 contacts in it. So, if I was selling this business, that would have been the headline, like 10,000 prior leads to like do, retargeting and marketing to. And so every time I send out one of those blasts, we usually get several leads that come in from that. And that, for the most part, is free, other than our monthly subscription to Constant Contact. So I think that has been one of the positives. One of the challenges that I've run into, and this is, I think, emblematic of just being inside of a franchise system, is you don't control everything. And so, I'm working with the corporate parent entity to do pay-per-click marketing. However, they don't control the website. That's controlled by a third party. And so effectively, the link is broken between when somebody clicks and then really knowing truly if that person has converted. And so what I'm doing is sort of spot checking the last 6 months of 2024. I'm looking at all the leads that the corporate pay-per-click says that they generated. And then I'm going through and I'm literally trying to hand tie that back to actual customers from probably four different sources: our backend CRM system, the third party that controls the website, Rainmaker from a communication standpoint, because sometimes people just straight up call and they don't actually ever submit a lead. And so now I'm sitting here I don't know if you've ever seen that meme of Charlie Day where he's got the big board and he's like, it's all connected. This is kind of that situation. And so I'm trying to triangulate who these leads are. But it's a bit of a struggle and it's kind of annoying to be honest, that for a, massive 40-year veteran company in this space that's backed by arguably one of the biggest private equity companies in the world, we can't track our leads. And when I look at people and I'm talking to them like, hey, what's the ROI on these? What are converting? And they're like a deer in the headlights. They have no idea. And it's just kind of surprising to me. So there's work that's going on with corporate to take control of the site. And so I think we'll see some improvements over that probably
That's
later
great.
this year. But it is a struggle that I'm working through literally right now.
So that's a really interesting point because now, in today's marketing and sales landscape, it's possible to have a single CRM, have it track exactly what campaign delivered the lead and, exactly what the sales outcome was for that. And that's what we provide a lot of our clients through our platform, Radar. Now, how, your perspective is probably really interesting, having been more of a 0-1 entrepreneur in your history where you could have just implemented a system which come at, pretty low cost now, and relative to the franchise ecosystem. So what are your thoughts about that? And what would be your advice to somebody out there in the ETA space contemplating a franchise? Is there tremendous
Um,
advantages that you have as well?
yeah, definitely. I think that if somebody hasn't started or run a business before, I would definitely encourage them to start within a franchise system because the amount of infrastructure and support that they provide you is massive, and is truly very, very helpful. Even though, I'm pointing out some of the flaws with the pay-per-click campaign, we do pay money through a royalty system that feeds up to the national entity. And so then they're doing national advertising for us, they're doing local advertising for us, they're covering the costs on branded keywords and things like that. So competitors aren't just bidding on our keywords and taking all of our customers who are specifically looking for us. So there's those kinds of elements that are important. And then I think the other massive thing that maybe just doesn't get talked enough about is the community. So here within the Colorado ecosystem of Merry Maids, we share all of our data on the back end. And so we can benchmark ourselves against each other. And then we're here to offer support. It's super cold in Colorado this week, and we got a bunch of snow on Tuesday. And I'm like pinging the other owners, like, hey, are you guys open? Are you closed? What do you guys do with call outs? Right. And so I have that network versus if I was just making this up on my own, I wouldn't have that. And then also because I'm new to this industry, I don't really know what all of the numbers should be and how much we should be spending relatively on different aspects of this business. And so having sort of a guideline profit and loss statement that's like, hey, for labor, you should be spending 40%, right? And then expect that on that labor and additional cost, you'll have another like 11%, but you should really be trying to hit a gross profit of, 49 to 50%, and then you should be spending XYZ on sort of these other things. Because if I was just starting this from scratch and I'd never worked in a cleaning business before, I'd be like, well, 50% is probably good for direct labor costs. But then all of a sudden I'm paying another 11% on top of that for taxes and benefits and things like that. And now my gross profit's 40% instead of 50%. So having that insight, that advice, and that structure, I think is extremely helpful when you're new into business. Now, I kind of came the other way where I did the 0 to 1. Now I'm doing a franchise system, but I think for me, where I truly needed a little bit of a break after the intensity of my venture-backed AI company, there is benefit of having that infrastructure in place because it's sort of less stuff that I have to think through and that I have to figure out. There's a full marketing team, for example, which I didn't really know on the front side. So instead of hiring my fractional chief marketing officer, I should have just really put a lot of time and energy into the Merry Maids corporate marketing team and relied on their support and help. And that plus the other things would have saved me tens of thousands of dollars out of the gate. And if I'd been patient for a few more months, I would have learned that those services existed. I just didn't know that out of the gate.
Got it. Oh, that's amazing. Tell me a little bit more about what that's like, because I'm sure people would want to know what you are getting from corporate and what those marketing efforts are like. And that's probably the people trying to go sort out this marketing attribution and fix those so you're getting really clear information on your ROI.
I mean, it's hard to say what other franchises are, right? Because I've got an N of one in terms of my knowledge of
Yeah, tell
inside
me
of
about yours.
franchise
Yeah.
systems. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But at least for Merry Maids, they just launched at the end of the year a marketing workbook for all franchisees. It's a Excel multi-spreadsheet workbook, and so you can go in and say, "Hey, here's what I'm looking to achieve from top line revenue. Here's the lifetime value of my customers. Here's average cleans." Here's where we're investing currently. Here's what the ROI on that is. Here's what our competitors are doing. Then there's space to sort of brainstorm new ideas. And then they have guides in there that says like, okay, if you want to hit 10% growth for the size revenue you are, you need to be spending 3 grand, 5 grand, per month on marketing. If you are going to do that and you now have this pot of 3 grand or 5 grand per month to work with, where are you going to spend it? What's going to go to PPC? It's going to go to LSAs, what might go to door hangers, what might go to, a sales center that's backing you up. Like all those things kind of get impacted and rolled up in that. And so to have all that infrastructure laid out by corporate and then somebody you can actually call and walk through it is super helpful.
So really sort of backdooring you, hey, here's the growth number you want. If that's the outcome, working through all of your numbers. So this is what you're going to spend on marketing, and this is actually how you're going to spend it. Because I think that's what a lot of people are trying to figure out today. There's so many different types of marketing, and if thinking about the typical paid, like Google and Facebook. Now you also have Google LSA, Google Performance Max. There's all these different advertising mediums, even within Google, and I think it is a big struggle to figure out how to optimize that. So
That's
that's really
literally all the stuff that I'm
fantastic.
working through right now.
That's
And I think
fantastic to have that kind of support.
bigger picture too, just stepping back out of my specific business and kind of into the world of ETA in general. That's also a trade-off of buying big versus buying small. There's a lot of reasons why it worked for our family to buy small and move fast, and I don't regret that decision, but it doesn't give you as much wiggle room to work with. Might not have established marketing budgets. If the prior owner wasn't spending money on marketing, it was solely relying on passive SEO to deliver leads, which I will say again are great when the business has been around for 40 years. But that's having that infrastructure in place is really helpful, and it's helpful having that SEO and those leads coming in. But if you're in a much bigger company, then all that infrastructure is in place and you maybe have a little more wiggle room. The flip side is if you do screw up, kind of like I did out of the gate with over investing, but you do it on a much, much bigger scale, that may not be survivable, right? So I don't necessarily regret buying small and making the mistake because I learned a really valuable lesson that hopefully as I grow into buying bigger businesses, I'll make sure not to repeat in the future.
So we've talked a fair bit about the marketing side, which I think is super helpful because things are changing rapidly there. On the sales side, early on, you made the choice to use an outside team with Rainmaker. Tell me a little bit about how you made that decision. Even though I had the good fortune of being pretty close to that, I'm curious what was going on in your mind and what really made you think that would be the right move, given you were winding back some other expenses in your business too.
Yeah, so I think number one, the professional element of it, right? It's how I judge other companies. I'm not sure everybody does, but Merry Maids is a premium brand, right? We're not Walmart, but we're not Aston Martin, right? Like we're like Titleist or Nike or Patagonia, right? Like we're a good, solid, reliable brand. And if you have just individuals in the office answering the questions or taking in those sales calls from customers, they could be having a bad day. They could be out. They could be talking to another customer. They could be dealing with an employee who's got a problem. They could be driving on the road to do a QA check. There's a million reasons why somebody might not be available and might be distracted and not able to take a customer call as soon as it comes in. And a statistic that really, really resonated with me is I was listening to a podcast and they were interviewing the CEO of Home Advisor or which is now Angie's. And what he was saying is that if you do not answer a lead in 16 minutes or less, your chances of closing that customer goes down by 80%. And so you have to be available to answer that call. So that's, I think, kind of one of the big things. And then the second big thing for me is, although I would interestingly say sales is my like kind of natural God-given ability, if you were, and that helped me close customers in the AI company and that helped me raise capital and things like that. I don't want the business to be reliant on me. Right. I'm looking for a lifestyle business. I'm not looking for a job where I need to be on 24/7. I remember, distinctly remember a call on a Saturday before you guys came on board, and I'm in the gym working out. I see it's a lead. I'm like, okay, that's valuable. I take the lead. I spend like 15 minutes on the phone with this lady. I give her a super reasonable quote for a fairly large house cleaning, and she like lost her mind. You would have thought she thought I was trying to like steal all of her life savings away from her. And I got off the phone and I'm like, what am I doing right now? Like, I am not looking for a job. I'm not looking to be a slave to this company. And so, I'm looking for outside providers who are better than I am, and I'm very good at what I do, to be able to make this business not reliant on me to run. And so I vetted 6 different companies, came down to Rainmaker and another company, ultimately really liked your approach. And I think it's you and I connected as well, which really helped with that whole process. But I want to be seen as professional. I want to get the leads immediately, and I don't want a job. And so those were kind of the 3 key things for me. And then I think longer term, the goal is like, how do we keep inching up the quality of the call center experience? Because right now it's better than most of the other franchises in the system, but it's like, how do we start trying to match the best franchises in the system? Because you kind of get into that rarefied air, and then there's no reason that everybody in the entire country shouldn't be using the service.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words, and that's exactly the kinds of things that we're trying to work on together, and really excited for things like the full marketing attribution data to be coming through with the data, because it's going to help us prioritize the leads, knowing what the sources are, what the quality is. And then, we're always constantly working on what's the sales strategy to close each type. And the further up in the funnel that we can go, the more information we have about that lead. So we can provide the right kind of prompting to the sales professional supporting that call. So totally
absolutely
aligned with that. I think it's going to be pretty awesome as that data flows through soon. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate your thoughts. And I think this will be super helpful to the ETA community as they're thinking about what they're going to do when they come into a business, as well as maybe some of the thoughts on the difference between franchises and non-franchises. And so, really, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.